I was cleaning up the shop this morning because it was really dusty in here. We had 50-mile-an-hour winds from about 6 in the morning till about 7 in the evening yesterday. It was crazy windy here. And when I opened the door to sweep out some of the dust, you see that right there? That's where the big overhead door seals against the concrete. And you can see the ribbons of dust that came in under that thing. No wonder my shop is so dusty this morning. Now it's a little bit dark over here, but I think it's good enough to see it. Man. This video is about this work stand you see here. It's got rollers up here. Swivels. It's adjustable by the jack. I designed it specifically for oil field pipe. It sits down between those rollers. There's a lot of oil field activity around me, and farmers like to use the old oil field pipe that is no longer usable for corrals. So when I go on site, I use this stuff a lot, but I still use some of the oil field pipe here in the shop too, and I've been wanting to make a new work stand for that for quite a while. I probably talked a little too much during this video. I don't know. See if I can do some clever editing maybe. And before I get into the action on the video of actual making this work stand, I'm going to talk a little bit about the evolution of my work stands and how I actually arrived at this design. So, a little bit of jabbering there before we get into the action. And also, I'm going to show off this table that it's sitting on a little bit here. Had a viewer asking about it, so I'll do a quick little walk around here. We use this table as a welding table. Grandpa said it's actually for working on oil pans, and he didn't know exactly what oil pan it was for. I've seen these tables around other people's shops, so at one point they were actually a common table. I just don't know what oil pan they fit, but they work great for welding on. This one has been used for, I have no idea how many years. Grandpa said he got it when he was young. It was just something that was nice to do some welding on. If anybody out there actually knows the exact oil pan that this is for working on, I really would like to know, because Grandpa doesn't know either. It's got the hole down here, you know, for straightening out around your crank. And it's got a few holes in it. And I asked Grandpa if he drilled those, and he said no, they were here. So there's some kind of line-up holes, and I don't know exactly what all. Every once in a while I put the flap disc on the hand grinder and just kind of knock off all these little welder berries that appear on it. You know, weld strikes, whatever. Everything just kind of builds up after a while. I try not to take it clear down and actually take a layer of metal off. I just try to go around and hit all the high spots and get it smooth again. It's a pretty flat table, you know, it's in a good plane. It's really great for doing layout work and whatnot on. It's got steel legs. You know, I think the whole thing is cast iron, near as I can tell. However, it is not a solid piece of iron. Probably can't show you up under here very well, but it is pretty thick, but it also has some ribs that go across there. You can see the legs are bolted on. But still, even at that, this table has a lot of mass to it. So anyway, just thought I'd show that off real quick. If you know exactly what it's for, I really would like to hear it. Alright, now on to the work stand video. I had a viewer inquiring about my yellow jack stand over here on the left. They saw it in the corner of one of my other videos. But the reason I'm starting here is I thought I'd go through the whole evolution of my work stands. And I'll actually build one. I'm going to build my new one for you here on camera too, so you get a little bit of fabrication in today's video. When I first started working up here in the shop as a kid, I don't know, I think I was about 10 years old when I built my first go-kart. Well, started building it. Took me a long time to get it done. At the bandsaw, Grandpa had this awesome work stand here on the right. It's just a torched off end piece of pipe with the coupler still on it, and he just set the strap iron across the top. We used that for years and years, and it was so annoying because you'd set your metal on there and then move it into the bandsaw, and of course that strap iron would slide off of there. About the time I was in junior high, I can't remember exactly when, Grandpa had a whole bunch of pipes that he needed to drill holes in. So he built this stand, which I thought was really neat. Take the old plow disc, put down there, a pipe inside a pipe with a bolt, there. He made a nice roller for it up here. It's really great for the drill press, but it does not go down low enough for the bandsaw. But I thought I'd show that because using that disc originally I thought was a great idea. It's really great though because you can just tilt this stand and roll it across the floor and move it around. But the downside is that disc never sits perfectly flat and it always has wobble to it. So a few years later, when I was in high school, one of my first projects in metal class was making this stand. So we'll zoom in on that. Now this stand, originally it did not have this pipe and pipe design, and also it did not have these bent rods down here. So this base is actually the foot off of a trailer jack, and this was some scrap iron I'd found. You can see it's welded right there, and I built it for the exact height of our bandsaw. And it wasn't long after I got it home that I had to put these rods on it because that little base was not even close to keeping the thing upright. Always fell over. And the reason it's got this pipe on here is because a few years ago I replaced the bandsaw I had, and it's higher than the old one, so I had to make this one adjustable. It's a good stand. It's something that I use mostly now on the catch side of the bandsaw. When the piece is cut, it falls onto that one. And then a few years back, I built this one over here. And this guy, I put a lot of time into building this roller. I actually put that piece of pipe in the Atlas lathe with a steady rest and laid down that entire outside of that pipe to make it nice and smooth because it was a rusty chunk of oil filled pipe. Machined it out on each end out here to press in a bearing on each side, and then I ended up machining a shaft. That shaft goes all the way through there. I ended up having to machine it down because those were an odd size of bearing. And then I had the pipe and pipe to make it adjustable. I did not have this jack on it at first. The pipe and pipe is something I've gotten completely away from now because it does this to you. And that's frankly very annoying and actually not safe, because if you don't get that bolt tight and you don't realize it with the jack on here and that head twists, your work will roll right off of that in a hurry. It wasn't too long after I built this stand that I had this idea to put this jack on here because I was tired of trying to get the work at the exact right height, especially if I already had something sitting on it. So I grabbed an old scissor jack off of a car, and that works great. It's really adjustable that way, And if you got your work already sitting on there and you realize you're not quite right in the bandsaw, you can crank it up and down real easy. But like I said, since it's pipe and pipe, if you go to adjust it, that head can turn on you, and that can really ruin your day in a hurry. So I advanced my design from that to these guys over here. So I'll show you these. these two stands, and I have another one just like it I carry for my on-site work all the time. These bearings are just out of old equipment. These two are out of a disc, and these two are out of a baler. This one over here, I used the scissor jack again. I have to say I really don't like it. It's alright, but it's a good place to bonk your knees. But I've discovered these Ford jacks are much better. The only trouble is I have a hard time finding them. I don't know why, but they're never in the junkyards around here. Having the square tubing inside of square tubing is so much better. Basically, this bolt down here has just become kind of a tensioner to take out the slot between the two pieces of tubing. So anyway, I'm going to make another one of these today, only you might recognize the rollers I'm going to use. I bought these rollers to make another one of these stands for here in the shop. Ended up using it as my makeshift steady rest last time, but anyway, I do enough pipe work here in the shop that I need one. And using that other wide roller, the pipe doesn't really stay on it too well. And also, you know, it works for a lot of things, like square tubing will sit in between those bearings. Anything small will sit right in there. It's really nice. So, after all this talking, let's get around to a little bit of action. And I'll go ahead and give you guys the measurements of all the pieces I use. Well, I've been playing with these wheels for a little while. I got these off the surplus center. And I'm a little confused by this seal that's on here. This seal here, which is this thing, presses in there, but if I put in one, then this bearing is flush with this side, and I can't put the seal in that side, and I still have all this overhang. This bushing is wider, so is what I'm thinking about trying, because I'm going to bolt these to a piece of square tubing to make my top roller assembly. And I thought about drilling out the hole big enough that this bushing would slide into it, but that causes a whole new set of problems. So I think I'm going to stick this bushing in the lathe real quick and shorten it, and then I'm not going to run this inner seal. So that bushing will be in there. Put the bolt and the washer on there, I think like that, and then I'll cut it just a little bit longer than what this wheel is here, so that housing will sit almost up against the wheel, like so. So I'm just going to scribe a line, get it set right. I'm just going to try scribing in there. And then I'll cut a little bit past that point. I'm not going to get too accurate with my measurements here. That seems pretty soft. Yeah, pretty painless. It's actually parted a lot easier than I thought it would be. I was afraid it'd be hardened metal or something, but That sure wasn't. Now, where I want my holes is centered this way. And then I want that nut, oh whoops, gotta make sure the seam is down. So this side is where I'll put the nut, or the hole, both. But I want the nut, so when it sets in here, it's the top of the nut is just hitting that curve. So I'll just eyeball by the curve out here. And that'll be center that way. Just kind of eyeball it across there. Actually, that's an inch up from the bottom. The edge of the ruler is straight with the bottom there. And then, let's see, 1 3/4 is 1/2 3/8, which 1/2 is 4/8, so that's 7/8. There we are. Center punch it and then drill a 1/2 inch hole clear through this thing. Alright, so anyway, that goes in there. Let's see if we got something right here. Oh yeah. Where's my nut? There it is. Over there. Okay. Alrighty here. That size of pipe will fit. And I also use this size of pipe a lot, and oh yeah, it clears too. Oh, where's that in the camera? There it is. Oh, had it for a second. There. It clears too. The bigger piece of square tubing is 16.5 inches long. That's what works out for me. And this stuff is 1 3/4 inches outside and 1 3/8 inches inside. The base plate is also 16 inches long, and it's 3 inches wide and 3/4 of an inch thick. I think the next step is we'll go ahead and put the tightening bolt in here. And when you do that, check to see what side your seam is on, and then make sure that you don't put it on that side. I'd actually recommend putting it perpendicular to it. That way when you're tightening up, you're tightening up the side that doesn't have the seam. So we'll go over here. This is just a 1/2 inch bolt I use. I like to use 1/2 inch because that's a 3/4 head, and I usually have a 3/4 inch wrench around. So all we're going to do is mark down the inch there and Find center. Then just lay everything out flat on the table. 6.5. Your pipe is 6.5 from the end to the edge of the strap iron, or just mark 8, an inch and a half in on your strap iron if you use that, whatever. Center and center lined up. That's all there is to it. The pipe is taller than the strap iron, and that will work to our advantage. I'll show you that here in a second. But just lay it out flat on the table and weld it up like this. Assuming your welder works. Having some gun issues. I may end up having to switch to a stick welder here because my diffuser and insulator are not working so good anymore. And I went to get a new one and they said, oh yeah, we don't support that gun anymore. But that's okay, because then I dropped a pipe on the gun and shattered it, so it's all taped up. So very soon I'm getting a new gun. I just don't know which one yet. I want that nice flex head one. We'll see what I end up with. So it's kind of tricky to weld with this thing right now. Apparently, I'm having trouble with my tip too. I welded both sides. Now, like I said, the strap iron is sets down lower. This will actually be the bottom. That gives you a little bit of clearance under there. And also this hole in the center, it was in this piece of scrap iron I used, but if it didn't have a hole in the center, I'd drill one in there. Because when we put this vertical piece on, that'll go right over that hole, and any rust or dirt or anything that gets in there then can fall out the bottom real easy. It's more useful for me where I'm out on site setting these things up in the dirt. I use a 5/8 bolt on there because the nut is able to go into that smaller square piece of tubing easier. And to get it to turn, all you have to do is just grind off the corners of the nut. Once we got that welded on there, drop 2 washers on it. Goes on this piece. This piece is 1.5 inches, 5 inches long. Oh, remember how thick that is. 1/2 inch thick. So drop the 2 washers on there. Drop that in there. Put the nut that's been very rounded on there. Maybe. And snug it up. Not tight. You want this thing to still be able to turn pretty easy, but you don't want this to flop. So play with that a little bit, and I'll just put a little short weld on there. And then this whole piece will go on top of the square tubing, and we'll weld it on there. Now if you're going to use one of these, what I call Ford jacks, I call them that because usually when you get a Ford car, that's the style they have. Just cut you a piece of angle iron, you know, the width of this square tubing. You know, probably 1.5 inch angle iron would work good. And then drill you a hole in the middle where it sets on that button for the bottom of the jack. Obviously not that direction. We'll set it up this way, but the reason we'll do that is we'll spot weld that angle to the bottom of the jack. At least I like to anyway. That way when you're moving these things around, your jack doesn't fall off of there. And also these little tiny hydraulic bottle jacks are really nice on these things as well. They're pretty darn cheap. I just don't like them because inevitably they end up leaking oil and making a mess, but you know, it's another route to go. So we'll put the head piece in here. I guess what you call it. Yeah, in there. That'll set in there. Oops. That jack isn't down all the way. So with the jack all the way down, set it up there, set this angle iron underneath there. Pull it out. And then we'll pretend to mark that. That ain't gonna work. Really? Well, that's pretty nice.